The mission home is located in a part of London called South Kensington, which is one of the nicest areas of London. I was able to serve in an area called Britannia, which is the singles ward that meets in the Hyde Park Chapel. Hyde Park is kind of like the central park of London, and part of it is close to South Kensington, and so that's where we served most of the day, is in South Kensington, and it was just beautiful. The architecture was phenomenal. The sites were just incredible. It was right next to the chapel's on the same street as the Natural History Museum, the Science Museum, the Victoria and Albert Museum, which is probably England's premier art museum. It's right across the street from the Royal Albert Hall, which is one of the most famous performing venues in England, the Royal College of Music, and also across the street from Imperial College, which is one of the top-ranked universities in the world. So it's just a very high-profile street. The street is entirely made of, I think it's granite, just really pretty, really beautiful. Everything there is expensive. I think they bought the mission home 60 years ago for a couple $100,000, and now it's, besides Temple Square, it's the most valuable piece of church property in the world, just because of its location. The mission president lives next door in a block of flats. That's how we say apartments, but in a block of flats, and his apartment is very nice. It was purchased by a mission president years ago. But just a really fun place to be. Just a couple other fun facts about the location. Just down the street is the Lamborghini dealership. So we see Lamborghinis all the time. Ferrari dealerships around the corner as well. Just a really fun place to be. One of my favorite places to get curry is just down the street from the chapel as well. But we would spend a lot of our time around the chapel on that street because it's where Imperial College is. There are so many people and so many tourists, but so many students who are ready to talk. So we would, because we were in the singles ward, we would pretty much just talk to the students, of which there were thousands. And we had a lot of success just talking to the students, especially the Chinese students there. There's a huge group of Chinese students at Imperial College and in London in general. But I remember one girl, she was walking down Exhibition Road, is the name of the street. And it was later in the evening, about 8:30. And we lived really close, so we could literally find on that street until 9 o'clock at night when we had to go home, because there were people outside, which was awesome. And she came up to us, she was walking, and I decided I was going to try a Chinese phrase on her. So I said, 你快乐吗? Which means, are you happy? And she looked up at us and she said, yeah, I am happy. Are you happy? And I was like, yeah, I'm happy. And we started talking to her. This girl was amazing. She moved out from her family when she was 15, and learned in China, learned the gospel from Chinese missionaries that came over from Hong Kong. So she already believed in Jesus Christ, which was awesome. And when we introduced the Book of Mormon to her, she said, oh, I've seen one of these before when I was 10 years old in China. And we were like, how did you see a Book of Mormon in the middle of China when you were 10? But she remembered it, and she progressed really well and was baptized a few weeks later. But that's just kind of what happens in London. There are so many people who are prepared, so many people from different cultures. I think in the singles ward we had people from, I want to say every different country, but just so many different countries. And it was just a really awesome experience. One of the neat things about the Hyde Park Chapel, where the mission home is that for the past 2 years, or about 2 years ago, they started a visitor center there. So right in the center of London, in your chapel, there's a visitor center that you can just bring people to. And we would just flock the people into the visitor center, stop them on the street, say, hey, there's this really cool exhibit. And it's the street of exhibits. So many of the tourists are already going to the museums anyway. It's just another museum. So we get them inside and they have their first experience with the church. We had another young man, one of my dear friends who just came to the visitor center. He knew there was a visitor center in London, and so he decided to come see it. And he got baptized about 6 weeks later. It was a really awesome experience to have a visitor center in your mission, and especially in such a great location. The London mission covers the north half of London. So there's the River Thames, and everything on the other side is the the London South Mission. But if you think about all of the famous sites that the missionaries probably have heard of, they're all in the North Mission, which is great for us because we get to see them all. But we would, you get to see the sites a lot, especially if you're driving around. We saw Big Ben, probably 2 times a week. But we would mostly travel to the areas where there were universities. There's an area called Holborn in Russell Square. I don't know if you've seen this TV show called Sherlock, the one with Benedict Cumberbatch, but it starts off in this park. And I remember I was watching it with one of my companions, and we're like, "That's Russell Square!" And we just got so excited because it was just a place where we had so many memories of finding people. We would go to this park and just find till our books were full. There were so many students there at the University College of London and at SOAS and just LSE, tons of universities in London, and it was fun to get to know all those students. One of my buddies, we were on an exchange, and we went, and he's an excellent guitar player, and so we went to Russell Square. We set up our shop, I guess, and he played the guitar and I sang, and we just got to know people. The first time we went, it was really successful. The second time it was raining. It happens a lot in England, and so it wasn't so successful. We just looked like miserable missionaries as we were getting rained on and our books were getting soaked. But it was so much fun to just go and share the gospel and with so many people, and you never run out of people to talk to and to just sit down and have a lesson with. So that was a little taste of London. I also served in East London, which was very different. A lot less money and a lot more people from different cultures. And what I mean by that is there's definitely the diversity in central London. But what I guess is there's less white people in East London, which was fun to get to know people from Africa, India, the Middle East. I've never met so many people from Pakistan and Saudi Arabia in my life, but it was very cool to be immersed a little bit in that culture and to see everything written in a different language. It felt like I was on my mission in the Middle East sometimes, or in Africa, but we were right there in the middle of London. So that's just a little taste of what London's like.
Our mission covered north of the Thames, and it extended east from there. And so most of the flavor we got, I was lucky enough to serve in enough positions that would actually cover the whole of London that I pretty much got to see every side. It's fun to see the flavor of different parts of the city. And the fact that there are really no cars there, everything's done pretty much by public transportation, means that the city feels a lot bigger than it actually is. I was surprised to come back and realize that a time that would take us an hour to go across was really only maybe 5 or 10 miles, and in a car where we have an interstate here where you can cover that distance much faster than that. The difference was the fact that traveling means you find the closest tube stop, you go down and you take the tube, and sometimes it requires changes and things just take longer. And I guess that would have been a nuisance, except for the fact that as missionaries, travel time was talking time. We got to enjoy using the buses and the trains as a chance to talk to people. And so it was no problem that things took longer to get around. The city itself is amazing because you can just walk 10 minutes and your environment completely changes. You can be in a different ethnic neighborhood, you can be next to another tube stop, and every tube stop has its own culture of art that's been put up there, or museums, or shops that have been put up to attract tourists. And so every part of London has its own different flavor, and so that's kind of fun to enjoy.
So when I lived in Welling, that was the most central I got in the city. I was living on the banks of the Thames. When we went jogging in the mornings, we would go and we'd jog along the River Thames and watch the boats pass by, passing off the docks, and we could see the bridges off in the distance. London was a great experience of my mission. Something about being in London South is everything north of the river is kind of where they have more of the posh areas, the areas where foreign dignitaries live, and Kensington, which is the most expensive postal code in the country, as well as most of the places where tourists go to visit. South of the Thames is a lot more housing. It's where people live that then commute north to go work in the city. And so it was great to live south of the river because instead of dealing with tourists often, we were always dealing with people that lived there and worked there. I think Welling was probably where I experienced the most of the diversity that exists among the people that live in the UK. A typical day was after we'd wake up and we'd do all our studies and we'd leave our flat and we'd walk out and the first person I talked to would be from Brazil. The person after that would be from Sri Lanka. The person after that would be from Spain. The person after that would be from Poland. The person after that would be from the States. The person after that would be from Mexico. And this was how it was anytime I was in London. So every place I went, I would be meeting people from all over the world. And it was fun to get to know all the different cultures and to get to know different people's habits and beliefs and to try foods from all over the world. Once you serve in London, you'll eat something called fufu, which is an African dish. It's basically, it's like bread cement that you dip in soup and you eat, and it just keeps you so full. And I learned on my mission how to meet and greet in, I think, 14 or 15 different languages, which is something I found to be really helpful among the people because it was an incredible icebreaker. I would meet someone from Ghana, and as soon as I would realize that they were from Ghana, I would ask them where they were from, and if they were from an area that spoke Twi, I would be like, "Oh, etuse, wahutasin," and they would be so happy to meet someone that spoke their language that they would stop and they would talk. And I did the same for many other cultures and different ethnicities and languages. When you live in London, it's all about buses as well. The entire mission, when I left, there was only 8 cars that full-time young missionaries would use. The rest were used by senior couples. The entire mission I spent walking. Walking and busing is basically the way you get around in London South. And so some areas like Farnborough, it would be just one single bus route that we get a bus pass on. But in London itself, you get an Oyster card, which is a pass that you can just tap on to any bus, any underground system, and most trains as well. And so anytime we wanted to get anywhere, we would jump on the bus. So one of the first things we would do as soon as you got into an area was look at the maps and try to memorize all the bus routes because it's key to know which buses get you where quickly. And while we're on the note of buses became one of my favorite proselyting experiences as well. Well, sometimes you get on a bus and all you want to do is just rest because you're so tired of walking and talking. People on the buses are often, tired too, and are ready to, any kind of distraction by talking to people next to them is very welcome. So I found it very effective to just jump on a bus and sit down next to someone and strike up a conversation. And it was a different kind of contact because instead of starting with the fact that I was a missionary, I was able to talk about them for a while and get to know them before inviting them to learn more about the church. It was one of my favorite ways to meet people on my mission, and very many, a lot of successes, a lot of teaching opportunities came out of that. South London is the most expensive mission that the church operates. It's mostly because of rent is so expensive for London, but also because travel and food are very expensive in London. The church gives you well enough money to handle housing and food and whatnot. As long as you're thrifty, you can make it through a month and eat well enough to be fine, as well as, depending on where you serve, members will feed you pretty well as well. I never once had an experience on my mission where I felt unsafe. There was never a time where I felt like I was in danger of being robbed or mugged in any way like that. While there were occasional vague threats from young teenagers or something like that just thought it'd be fun to poke fun at a holy man or something like that, it was far and few between. I can only think of maybe one specific instance where that happened. That being said, there are areas that you need to avoid, but anyone in that in each area will let you know where those are. But even some of those areas that are supposed to be dangerous, I never once felt unsafe in. You don't have to worry about your own rent. I know some missions, they have you take care of that and haggling prices and stuff like that. But the mission office takes care of all rent, and so you never have to once look at how much your rent costs. So your two main expenses are transportation and food. And so they give you, when I was there, it may have changed now due to inflation, but it was about 120 pounds or so a month for food, which, as I said, was perfectly fine as long as you didn't eat out too much and you were smart in your shopping and were willing to cook. That was always well enough to live well. Especially if you and your companion combined your money together to buy your food. Transportation, depending on where you live, they give you the amount that you need for a bus pass. In some cases, we would dip into our food money to buy train tickets, because we usually have a little bit of that left over if it was more convenient or better or more time effective for us to take the trains every once in a while. But other than that, they would just give you the exact amount that you would need for a monthly or weekly bus pass, which would then work on all the buses in your district. One thing I would say about preparation for serving in London is obviously it rains, so you have to have good rain gear. A good enough, just buy an umbrella that's not too expensive, but that won't break easily because it's often windy while it's rainy. So if you have a cheap umbrella, it will unfold on you and will be annoying. Also, if you can get an umbrella that's compact, but not too cheap, it's very helpful, because I tried to have my umbrella on me at all times because you never knew when it was going to start raining. As far as clothes go, I'd actually recommend that you buy most of your mission clothes out there, because frankly, British nice dress is nicer and cheaper than American stuff. And so something that some of my friends did that I thought was a good idea is if you just buy a suit and enough shirts to basically get you through the MTC, and then save some of your money for when you get out there. Because I was able to buy a British suit, which was much nicer than my American suit, for about, the equivalent was about $70, while an American suit costs around like $160 or so. And also the shirts there I was able to get for £5 each, which is roughly about $7. Ties as cheap as £1, which is like $1.75. So yeah, I'd recommend buying most of your clothes and gear and stuff out there.